Hey, I'm Tim, and this channel is all about growing food and growing soil. So today's topic is agroforestry, and these are experiments I've just started here lately. And so I want to kind of explain the concept of syntropic agroforestry and show you how I'm applying it. And I have one specific tree that I'm really excited about that I want to share with you guys. All right, so the concept of syntropic agroforestry, real fast and quick, not complete, is you use support trees that don't produce fruit to produce organic matter to then feed your fruit producing trees. So you trim heavy, prune heavy, and let that drop to the ground, break down, rot, feed the soil, and meanwhile the tree grows back. So you're not killing them, you're just heavily pruning them and using them to feed your fruit producing trees. So when I started my backyard garden, whatever you want to call it, I had much more of an orchard mindset, a mixed orchard mindset, where I had, this fruit tree and then that one over there, and kind of had them in rows and whatever. But what I'm realizing is there's ways to be a lot more productive in your mixed orchard. So what I've started doing here is I've begun to plant trees that are not productive trees, but they're support trees. And so what I'm looking for in a support tree is it needs to be very resilient. It's a huge benefit if it's a nitrogen fixing legume, and it needs to be able to regrow and basically be unkillable. And this perfectly describes a lot of invasive plants. So we're going to cut over to this tree real quick. Now this moringa is a great tree to use for a support tree. Plus you can, eat the leaves, but I do a lot of chop and drop. This tree got whacked the couple weeks ago, and I'm using this one to let it go to seed. But over here is a tree a lot of people don't really talk about too much, and this is the river tamarind tree. And as you can see, it produces a lot of seeds. I've got probably 2,000, I think I estimate 2,000 seeds on one tree. So that's pretty amazing. The other benefit of this tree is it is a nitrogen fixer, and it gets to a place where it can produce seeds within like 2 years. So this is a 2-year-old tree producing seed. I believe it's 2. It could technically be 3, but I believe it's a 2-year-old tree, and it's pretty stout. And the other thing I wanted to test is this going to be a resilient tree? And so I have 2 here actually, and this one got whacked back. So right there, let me get closer on that. Alright, so this is called pollarding, and I whacked it right there about 4 or 5 feet off the ground. And as you can see, it's just coming back really, really well and very vigorously. And we haven't even gotten a ton of rain. And so this is a tree that's from Mexico. It's more from an arid area, and it's very prolific over there. And so this is something I want as a support tree, because I can whack it and whack it and whack it and keep cycling back the carbon, which would be the trunk and woody parts, the nitrogen, the green parts, and all the moisture that is in the plant. And so I can cycle nitrogen, carbon, and water all at the same time with this one tree. Plus the added benefit of all that nitrogen way up in the air? Yeah, it goes into these trees, and it actually pumps it down into the ground. And every time I prune, that nitrogen is released into the soil. Alright, so each pod's producing about 20 seeds. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to kind of sprinkle these along the edges and the rows that I've got. And especially the worst parts of my garden, because these trees, they just grow really well in terrible soil. So that river tamarind, it pretty much checks the box for everything I want it for. It's a nitrogen fixer, it's very hard to kill, it does great in arid climates, or if we have a drought here. It grows back very quickly, produces a lot of seeds, and if I had a 6th finger, probably be a Spaniard trying to kill me. But no, my point, hopefully you got that. But the 6th point is that it also produces a flower for pollinators. So there's a lot of function to this one tree. and I have not found it to be invasive here in the Jacksonville, Northeast Florida area. I haven't, the only ones I've seen were at the Mexican restaurant, but I haven't seen any growing, in random places, so that's kind of cool. Alright, so I want to show you some other support trees that I've got, because this is the most important part of the system, is your support trees, because without your support trees, you don't have any support for your fruit trees, and so they're not going to be as productive as they would be otherwise. So this guy right here, that is a catawba tree. I'm really excited about that, and I'm growing everything from seed, and everything's barely irrigated. But the cool thing about catawba is it is a host for some kind of moth, I believe. But there can just be so many caterpillars on this that it could be a viable option to feed to chickens or ducks or even pigs. Also, what I'm noticing with it is it grows pretty rapidly. It's easy to propagate from seed, and it's really just a pretty and lush tree. And so as I'm looking at it, and as I've looked at more mature specimens, it holds a lot of nitrogen on the plant, on the branches, a lot of green stuff. And so to me, that's pretty cool, and that's something that I want to be growing and supporting my Syntropic agroforestry system. Of course, another great support species is moringa. In my climate, it will freeze back, but it'll generally come back up from the stump. You can see way up there's flowers, and there's actually some bumblebees on them. So you got the pollinator service. It seeds readily. If it doesn't freeze, it'll usually seed that year. And then, of course, there's edibility to it. But you can whack them back, and they will sprout back up. And you can cut them down to the stump 3 times a year, from what I hear. All right, this is a mulberry tree, and it can actually serve as a support tree and a fruiting tree, because they require so much, or they can take so much pruning. And actually there's wild mulberries all around Jacksonville, especially on the north side, and they're invasive. And they get whacked back, and they come back, and they have this thick root, and they do well in arid regions. So when I lived in Turkey, there's mulberry trees everywhere. And so this is a tree you can use as a support tree and a fruiting tree. And so it does both, which is pretty sweet. All right, this ginormous bush here, this is some type of ginger. I don't know what kind, but as you can see, it just produces a lot of biomass. I can whack this all down, it can freeze back, and I can put this all into my rows. And so this is a perennial root crop, sort of, that cycles just a lot of nutrients and a lot of biomass, and that's what I want. This one I think is 2 or 3 years old. Now I've got a few canna lilies around the yard as well, and this is something I'm just kind of starting. They produce a decent amount of biomass. I'm not super impressed with how much they produce, but every time I whack them down, they come right back, and they produce a flower that I've seen hummingbirds on, so they serve the garden well. So generally, after they flower, I whack them back. Grasses are another support species you can have. This is a perennial vetiver grass. I mean, all vetiver is perennial. And so I can whack this back every year, probably a couple times a year actually, and add that biomass to the ground for my trees. Figs are another one that are fruiting, and they'll take a heavy pruning from arid regions. I mean, this is all new growth right here. They just put on a ton of growth. So I'm excited to get some figs off of this. And for my backyard, I'm not letting any fruit trees get over 8 feet, because that's how high I can reach. And I'm not going to let them get too big. So everything, even the fruit trees, are going to get pretty decent prunings every year. Even if they're not technically a support species, I will grow things that will take heavier prunings and utilize them for support. All right, so if you can't wait for trees to grow and to produce biomass for you, you can grow annuals. This is chia. literally from the grocery store. You can buy a pound of it for like, I don't know, $4 or whatever. But I'm gonna go ahead and prune this back because it's kind of encroaching on my moringa. And this will re-sprout, so it'll grow all during the warm season. And it's literally that easy. And you just let this hit the ground and it will break down, adding biomass to your soil. So it's starting to think about flowering. So I'm gonna cut it back, prune it back into a vegetative state. And all this stuff that I just cut off will break down in the ground. And this will keep growing. Actually, I could probably be a little more aggressive, so since I can, I will. And this is totally subjective, and you can do things however you want. And so whack that thing back and we'll see how it does. And I think I'm pretty confident it's going to come back. So this is probably the most attractive thing to me about syntropic agroforestry, is that there's no like rules or like anything rigid to it. It's kind of you plant things in a row, and then you get to just manage it based on kind of what you're perceiving. It's more of an art, and you're following concepts and you're making decisions based on concepts rather than add X, Y, and Z and blah blah blah. But I can take, you know, native trees or invasive trees or any species I want and apply them to the system and see how they do. And basically it's like get as much stuff in there as you can, see what works, and then cut out the rest. And if you can't kill it, good, you know, just keep whacking it back, and that's part of your management, part of your creating more soil and creating more food. So I hope this video has given you a decent understanding on what syntropic agroforestry is and how you can start yourself. Because I did not start out with this idea because it's something I learned more recently. And now I'm like, oh, well, I was kind of doing it, kind of not, but this gives me a better framework and a better direction of where I want to go with my backyard. So, syntropic agroforestry on the yardstead. How great. Next, we'll be incorporating animals, hopefully. I have some secret animals I will show you soon. All right, bye. Oh, wait, we got a quick bonus bush here. This beautiful bush right here, butterfly bush I believe it's called. It's a perennial. You can whack it back, it comes back. And it produces these beautiful flowers. Hummingbirds, butterflies, all of them, they love it. All right, see you, love you, bye.